discussing ordinance amendments relating to waterfront parking regulations. May we have a roll call?
Councilmember Gutierrez.
Here.
Councilmember Rouse.
Here.
Madam Chair Snedden.
Here.
Thank you.
And do we have no public comment for items not on the agenda? Okay, thank you. So with that, we will start with the staff report.
Madam Chair.
First, we will start with a comment from Councilmember
Thank you,
Ross.
Madam Chair. I am, in fact, a slip holder, so I will need to excuse myself from this hearing.
We'll miss you.
I know.
Thank you. And then with that, we would like to invite staff report.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. We are here with proposed parking ordinance changes, and I'm just going to start off with a little bit of overview just to set the stage for you. The Waterfront Department currently operates and manages 8 public parking lots from Ledbetter all the way over to the Cabrillo East parking lot that is adjacent to the Cabrillo Pavilion. We also operate and manage 2 joint-use parking lots that, along with Santa Barbara City College, those are the 2 lots adjacent to La Playa Stadium. We offer 2 annual permits, a general permit, otherwise known as our red permit, which is $125 a year, and our slip permittee permit, also known as a blue permit, and that is $95 a year. As far as the general permit is concerned, it exempts vehicles from hourly parking fees in the waterfront. It is not valid on Stearns Wharf, and it also allows you to park in Harbor, Maine for up to 72 hours at a time. Our slip permittee permit, or the blue permit, exempts vehicles similarly from hourly parking fees in the waterfront parking lots. It's not valid on Stearns Wharf, but you're allowed to park in Harbor, Maine indefinitely. Our current situation, as of, well, currently, is one in which we've seen an increase in parking demand over the last several years. There's been a whole lot more activity in and around the waterfront, everything from the emergence of the Funk Zone, as well as the reopening of Lower State Street. We've also had a growth in water sports, including kayaking and most notably your stand-up paddleboarders. And what has happened is that's produced a whole lot more demand on a very finite resource, waterfront parking. Consequently, we have temporarily full on a lot of occasions, generally the weekends, anywhere from the spring all the way through fall, including this past weekend, for example. You can count on at least a temporarily full sign. We still allow access in and out, but the parking lots are considered full. Consequently, we've had an increase in complaints from everybody from business owners to the public to slip permittees, visitors, and everybody in between. This is an everyday situation down at the waterfront parking lot. So in order to ascertain what the public was going through as far as the parking issues in waterfront parking lots, we put together a public workshop that was held on June 13th of this year. We had over 50 attendees at the workshop, and we broke them out into 5 different groups. In each of those 5 groups, there was also a waterfront staff person that was charged with writing the answers to the questions down and to keeping everybody on track and making sure everybody had a voice in the conversation. We posed 3 questions to the public. What is currently working well? What needs to be fixed, and what needs to be left alone? And a summary of all of these answers was provided for you in attachment 1 to your staff report. For the purposes of this effort, we have focused on the what needs to be fixed. I do want to let you know that all the answers, regardless of their priority, are important, and they can be considered for future actions if warranted. The answers in your in your attachment are shown in priority order based on the number of responses. So you'll see a 5X, and that means all 5 tables had the same answer. 4X, 4 out of the 5 tables, 3X, etc. So for this particular effort, we will focus on those with majority agreement. The first item that was advanced at all 5 tables was enforcement of parking rules. The public wanted more enforcement. Just to give you a sense of our current enforcement efforts, Harbor Patrol over the last 2 calendar years has issued 124 citations for 72-hour violations, 8 citations for camping, and 0 citations for operability issues. Regarding the last 2, the 8 citations for camping, we usually spot folks trying to camp, and so we move them along, so that's why you don't see many of those. And then for operability, we usually give the people 48 hours to prove operability, and as you can see, they've all done that. But as a result of this being the number one item, we took the public's comments to heart, and Harbor Patrol has increased their patrols in all of our waterfront parking lots, and they're focused on camping, vehicle size limits, 72-hour violations, and again, inoperable vehicles. The second issue is actually coming to a close, but at the time was oil industry crew members parking in the waterfront parking lots. This past March, we received a call from 2 of the biggest contractors of our offshore oil derricks. They had an emergency situation where the Casitas Pier, which is their primary loading and unloading area, was shut down due to being damaged by a series of winter storms. They reached out to us with an emergency request, and in the spirit of regional cooperation, we granted that. At the time of this meeting back in June, we had about anywhere from 30 to 70 day workers using our parking lots. We also had a number of overnight workers. Those are folks who are out on the derricks for 7 to 14 days, also using our parking lots. Throughout the summer, we moved these folks around as the pier was getting fixed in order to minimize impact to the public. But currently, as of right now, those day workers are all back in Carpinteria. We currently have about 5 to 8 overnight, that's the long-term, the week or 2-week workers still using Harbor Main, but we anticipate that the Casitas Pier will be back in full operation by the end of this month, and it will no longer be an issue. But when we looked into this issue, we realized that the Waterfront Department has no authority to deny parking permits to any individual or any business entity. So with that, staff recommends this amendment change. Duty and power to manage. The waterfront director shall have the duty and power to manage all uses of waterfront parking lots and may deny issuance of parking permits to any person or entity when such permit or permits would unduly interfere with coastal access or public parking. So that would help us in situations like this. And it's not just the oil folks. We've had requests from a lot of high-tech companies down in the Funk Zone where they would like to purchase 100 parking permits so their staff can park in our parking lots. So that would help us address that issue. The third issue advanced was a big one, and so we had to split it out into 3 separate things. Too many storage vehicles, eliminate oversized vehicles, and blue permits, those are slip permittee permits, should not be allowed to park for 24/7, 365. So I'm going to address each one of these individually. Too many storage vehicles. The original intent of our blue permit, or our slip permittee permit, was to allow for folks going out on sailing adventures, fishing adventures, races, and things like that, marine-related items, to be able to park their car. Over the years, people have glommed onto this, and we do have some slip permittees who use the lot to store vehicles. We have quite a bit of those. These vehicles are used as garages, and they've been named as such, and storage units. These storage units negatively impact the harbor community as well as the community as a whole. They take up spaces and they never move. They also inhibit access to the coast. And that's an important piece to remember here. I want everybody to realize it's not just big, large vehicles. This is a standard Chevy Suburban that obviously has not moved in many, many weeks. But it's important to note the storage issue, it's not just staff or the community down at the waterfront that has realized this. We've also had the Coastal Commission realize this issue. And this made its way into the recent local coastal program, section 3.1-19. Long-term parking of vehicles that are primarily used for storage shall be discouraged and not displace coastal access parking within the harbor lots. Eliminate oversized vehicles. Oversized vehicles are an important component of the waterfront. They deliver goods and services to local businesses as well as slip permittees, whether it's UPS, FedEx, and everybody in between. So we do feel that they should continue to be allowed access. We're not cutting them off. They're still allowed access. But due to the proliferation of storage vehicles, the department proposes eliminating annual parking permits for any vehicle exceeding one or more of the following. The first is if your vehicle exceeds 22 feet in length, you would not be allowed to get an annual permit. Now, the current limit is 20 feet, so we're bumping this out 2 additional feet to accommodate. This 22 feet seems to be more the standard with your larger trucks. And in trucks, I mean pickup trucks and that type of thing. 90 inches high. If you exceed that, we would not be issuing an annual permit. And just to note, the height limit on our city streets in that ordinance is 82 inches. So we are giving an additional 8 inches to that. And then the third part is if you are beyond 82 inches wide, you would not be issued an annual permit. We realize it's not a one-size-fits-all, so we do have waivers. We have proposed some waivers for commercial ocean-dependent priorities, including but not limited to commercial fishing operations, our leaseholder businesses, our business activity permit holders, and then also oil spill response activities. So those folks have the possibility of getting a waiver. Last, 3C, blue permits should not be allowed 24/7, 365 parking. Again, the original intent was for multi-day trips. We found that that's being abused, and these vehicles, again, inhibit access to the coast. So this is what we're proposing. That's a lot, but I can sum it up real quickly. Staff recommends amending the municipal code so that harbor slip permittees may park for no longer than 30 consecutive days. You come across, if your car is parked there for 30 days, it's obviously a storage issue, and at that point in time, you must exit the harbor main lot for 96 consecutive hours. So if you're in the harbor main lot, and day 15 comes around and you need to run up to Vaughn's, and you come back, that restarts the clock. So it's more of a deterrent than anything, but it would not allow vehicles to sit in the same stall year after year after year and not move. As we looked into the blue permits, we also realized there were some issues with our red permits. And currently, you're able to park for 72 hours if you receive permission from the waterfront department. What we found is that this, again, was for folks going out on boats. That was the intent. But what we found is that people have been parking there when they go see their grandma back in Wisconsin, or they go on a trip to Florida or Europe, and they leave it there for a couple weeks at a time. So in order to curb these abuses, we're recommending that the code limit the extensions for maritime reasons only. So again, if you're going out on a fishing trip, a dive trip, you're going out to the islands, something along those lines. And we're proposing the wording as follows. The waterfront director or his or her designee may permit a person to park a vehicle in the harbor parking lot over the 72-hour limit for maritime reasons. The vehicle owner must register with the Waterfront Department Parking Office and obtain and display in the vehicle written evidence of that permission prior to leaving the vehicle in the lot. We feel that would be a big help for these types of abuses. The number 4 item that came up were the current hours of our Los Baños exit. That's the exit over by the pool. At that point in time, those hours, we were closed Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday through Friday, we were open 3 p.m. to 8 p.m., and Saturday and Sunday, 11 to 8. That was during our busy season from May 1st to September 30th. In the lighter season, we changed that. It's just open Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays in the hours listed above. So based on the public comments, as of July 15th, we changed those hours. We thought that was a great idea. We were happy to hear that. And so now from May 1st to September 30th, it's open daily from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. We've received a lot of positive feedback from this. And note that we do have the flexibility. If it stays warm through October and November, we can keep doing this. It's not a problem. So once the slower time comes, we'll just monitor it on a day-to-day basis and put staff in there if needed. And our off-season hours would remain the same. Our number 5 issue that came up, special events, both ocean-related and non-ocean-related, make parking difficult. And we do agree. At the same time, it's nice to have special events. It shows that the area is popular. It gets people down to enjoy the coastline, to enjoy the boats, walking, running, everything in between. It's interesting to note that our special events and the ones that we participate in from a parking standpoint, whether it be blocking off parking or assisting with that, have gone down from 285 in 2011 to the last calendar year we had 130. Waterfront lots are first come, first served, and we feel that that's a good model. It provides equal access to all the public for public parking. As part of this, we feel that what we'd like to do is expand our social media presence, and when there are special events coming up, put something out there so the public knows, hey, we've got this big event coming, plan accordingly. We still want to encourage people to come down, but we want them to maybe plan their trip a little bit better.
May I ask you a clarifying
Sure.
question? Is that, in 2011, that's 285 events in 1 year? That's almost every day of the year?
That's correct. So it's spread out over the years. So on the weekends, we'll get multiple events at one time. You may have a run going on at Ledbetter Beach, 2 weddings going on the East Beach, another happening at when it was open, Cabrillo Pavilion, that kind of thing.
Understood.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it adds up real quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The number 6 item that came up was the need for designated parking for SLIP permittees. This has kind of floated around for a while. Often it comes from folks in Marina 1 who are kind of farthest away from the main parking lot. As far as looking into this, we've discussed this many times, and we feel that designating parking for SLIP permittees would preclude the public access to both the harbor and the coast. We feel that designated parking is not consistent with public interest or public policy. And again, we feel that the first come, first served model of operation really suits everybody the best. The number 7 item that came up was the fact that we lose parking spaces when we restripe our parking lots. ADA spaces appear and regular spaces are lost. That's correct. We generally go through our lots on a rotating basis, and each lot is resurfaced about every 5 to 7 years. As part of that effort, we are required to submit plans and get permits. And in order to get those plans submitted and the permits issued, we need to be in compliance with ADA requirements. And so quite often, those ADA spaces are larger and take up more space, and then standard spaces are lost. That does happen quite a bit. But in order to keep our lots at the appropriate level of maintenance, we will continue to do this. And of course, look for ways to minimize those impacts. And lastly, number 8, the public was concerned about non-waterfront businesses parking in Harbor, Maine with general permits. We have found over the years, as word has gotten out, we have landscape companies, painting companies, taxi cab companies, and a whole host of others who park all of their vehicles down in our parking lot because they can get a $125 permit. They come down each day, pick up the car, go to work, come back, drop it off in the evening. Not the intent of our parking lots, these public parking lots. So this, similar to item number 2 that we discussed earlier, would be taken care of with this particular amendment, duty and power to manage, where the waterfront director has the duty and power to manage all those uses and may deny issuance of parking permits to any person or entity when such permit or permits unduly interferes with coastal access or public parking. So those were the 8 majority items that we've addressed as part of this effort. In conclusion, again, we've seen an increase over the last 7-8 years of the popularity of the waterfront and the harbor. We've also seen increased pressure on our limited parking resources, and the result has been an increased number of complaints. So throughout the last number of months, waterfront staff has worked with the city attorney. We've worked with our community development staff and the local community to address these issues. We have, as I stated, included a number of operational changes already, including the increased enforcement, as well as the expanded Los Baños hours, the Los Baños exit hours. And the proposed municipal code amendments would, 1, minimize misuse of public parking lots. It would preserve the working harbor per the harbor master plan, as well as the local coastal program, as I mentioned. And it would enhance access to public parking lots and the coast. On July 22nd, the Harbor Commission's Parking Subcommittee unanimously approved the proposed municipal code amendments. We then moved on to our Harbor Commission, and the Harbor Commission again unanimously approved the proposed municipal code amendments. And we are here today to present to the Ordinance Committee. And with that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'd like to thank Ariel Kalan for helping us throughout this whole process. I also have with me Eric Ingebretson, our Harbor Patrol Supervisor, and Cesar Barrios, our Parking Supervisor, to help answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. We do have a question from Councilmember Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, staff, for the report. I know that on city streets, if you get a parking ticket, you can contest it and meet with a parking supervisor and argue your case as to whether or not you should have been ticketed. Does the harbor have a similar opportunity for these people to contest their tickets? Because what I see here is that there's a few bad actors, but the entire community is going to be faulted for it. So I'm wondering if staff can just focus in on those bad actors and have them address one-on-one personally rather than change the entire situation for parking.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Gutierrez, we have tried to move these vehicles on for many, many years. This is a problem that's existed for well over a decade. We've looked at every possible avenue, we think every possible avenue to address this. We have at any one time, I just went through there the other week and found, I believe it was 46 vehicles that were obviously very much storage vehicles. I kind of come at it with a different set of eyes than others. I was trying to be conservative. I had one of our tenants, a restaurant owner, go through. I didn't ask him to. He went through it. He was on a walk with his wife, and that's what they decided to do one morning. And he told me that they picked out 126 vehicles that they perceived as to be long-term storage, haven't moved, covered in dust, weeds growing up around it. So it's quite a bit of bad apples that we've tried to address in a number of different ways. We feel that the annual permit process is the way to really get at this and take the biggest bite out of the apple. It's not going to solve the problem, but it will significantly improve the situation down at the waterfront. We have our parking folks are able to issue collection envelopes, and we do allow folks to come in and contest those. Those are when they're at the Luke Pay and Park stations. So we do have a very open-ended process with that they can come in and contest those. They might have put the receipt in their pocket, not on their dash, so we can get rid of those. And then we also have the more formal process with Harbor Patrol and those permits. But we do offer, they can contest those as well, or does that go to I'll let Mr. Ingebretson jump on that one.
Yes, they can contest them, Madam Chair and Councilman Gutierrez. It's similar to the police department, the same formal process. And right now, with this ordinance in place, or what's before you, is just trying to get an even playing field for everyone, not just a select few. There are opportunities taken, and it's just sort of gotten out of hand.
And I want you to please keep in mind, too, this does not eliminate these folks from coming into any of our waterfront parking lots. You're still allowed to come in. You would just not be able to get an annual permit, and so you would have to pay a daily rate. So if you need to come down for a day and do some work or whatever, you're fine to do that. You are still welcome there. You're just going to have to pay a daily rate as opposed to getting an annual permit.
Madam Chair and Councilmember Gutierrez, just to add as well, all those vehicles are legally parked. So to your comment about us dealing with the bad apples, they're not doing anything wrong legally. They're legally parked. They're just misusing the current process of the parking permit. That's what we're trying to change.
How? Yes.
So they're not receiving permits, parking citations.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Gutierrez, there is a shift in philosophy going on here, and it's partly practical and partly responsive to our recently approved local coastal plan and land use plan. The change in philosophy is to give the waterfront director discretion to allow those maritime or coastal dependent or access related uses and forbid all of the others. So while the staff have added a blanket rule that applies to everyone, under this ordinance, the waterfront director would have authority to grant exceptions when it was warranted for reasons that make sense in light of the ocean, maritime, ocean dependent, and access.
Okay, so as of right now, people leaving their vehicles there for prolonged periods of time is not actually breaking the law in any way, but this ordinance will then actually make it so that they're breaking the law.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Gutierrez, this would, if they stayed for beyond, it depends. If you're a blue permit, a slip permit, T permit, if you stayed there beyond 30 days, you would be cited. If you were a red permit, if you're beyond that 72 hours and you're not there for maritime related reasons and have proof of such from us, then you would be cited. So these folks sitting here now, they're in compliance with the law. They're not breaking any laws.
But it's become a problem.
It is a big problem, and we get complaints, slip permittees, the public, visitors, tenants, moms coming up to pick their kids up from swim camp. It got to a point finally where we really needed to start this process, and this is something we've been talking about for quite some time as to how to address this, and we've gone around and around year after year trying to figure out how to do this, and we feel that addressing it via the permit process while still allowing these vehicles to come in. So it's a little different than the city streets where they're not allowed. I mean, there are some exceptions. You're still allowed to come down. You can come down and do your day work. If you need that vehicle down there, you can still do that. You're just going to have to pay the daily rate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then I have a couple of questions before we open to public comment. First, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank the Waterfront Department for all you did helping in the recent maritime disaster, and that was really extraordinary, so thank you. About the ordinance itself, so I just want to clarify, for someone who lives on their boat but has a vehicle, they need to be moving it within those 30 days at some point, or could you clarify that for me?
Madam Chair, that would be correct. So if you're a slip permittee, if you're a slip permittee and also happen to be a liveaboard, you have access to the blue permit. So yes, you would have to move that. If you're going to, at the 30-day mark, you would have to move it. And we feel that if your car hasn't moved in 30 days, that's a storage vehicle. It's there for storage. Okay. And just to separate the two, when you're a slip permittee, or I should say when you're a liveaboard, it doesn't come with a parking spot. That's separate. They have to buy a permit and that, just like everybody else.
And is a liveaboard limited to one blue permit, or is each slip you could have multiple blue permits?
Madam Chair, each slip is allowed one blue permit. So if you have a boat, it may be owned by 8 different people who share ownership of that boat. First person in there gets a blue permit.
Okay, so
everybody else
permit.
Everybody else gets a red. And we generally have about 600 to 650 blue permits issued per year. And we have 1,143 slips, roughly. So
roughly half
exactly
are blue permittees.
Correct.
And then is the coming and going of those vehicles monitored by that license reader at the gate entrance, or is it just by looking at the vehicle and seeing if it's dusty or not?
Madam Chair, our license plate recognition program at this point in time is strictly for ingress and egress. It recognizes your plate, it opens it, and then closes it on your way as you pass it. That software does have the capability to more accurately regulate who's coming in and who's coming out. We haven't gone that route yet, but it is an opportunity. What we currently do now is our Harbor Patrol makes regular patrols of the lot and chalks the lot, chalks the tires. And we also have, not only in addition to Harbor Patrol, we have our parking staff routinely going through the lot just to make sure everything's okay, everything's running smoothly. And so our lots aren't massive, and so you really start to get to know vehicles and where they park and where they stay and where they don't stay.
Okay, and then for the extension beyond the 72 hours for maritime uses, what happens when someone is coming to launch and it's a Saturday or a Sunday? How do they get, are there options for them on the weekend to get that extension, or do they need to come on Friday before closing?
Madam Chair, our offices are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So if you come there at 2 o'clock on a Friday morning, you can come on up to the office and Harbor Patrol, talk to a Harbor Patrol officer, and they can get you that exception, that waiver for the 72-hour limit.
So that's part of what this does, is empower this department to grant those extensions.
We currently have that ability, but what we'd like to do is tailor it down for maritime reasons only, because now people are abusing it and they'll go on vacation, and instead of parking at the airport or somewhere else, they'll just leave their car there, get an extension, because we're not actively asking. This way, we'd be allowed to say no, sorry.
Understood. Thank you. And then I was, I think, particularly disturbed to hear about how many businesses might be using the parking lot for long-term parking. Is that because we have large vehicle storage, or just because it's proximity to the waterfront, or?
Madam Chair, I think it's a matter of convenience. We have a parking permit that's relatively cheap as opposed to parking in a private lot or a public storage space. I would say that's part of it. Also, I think part of what's driven it too is the previous ordinance regarding the city and oversized vehicles parked on the street. We've seen an increase in that down at our harbor main lot, and our other lots during the day as well. So I think it's a combination of things. Yeah.
And then are there people living in their vehicles?
Not that I'm aware of. Our Harbor Patrol makes regular canvasses of the area. They are keen to spot when a vehicle is being lived in. It's, like I said in a previous slide, it's mostly camping, and people just might not know the rules, and so our Harbor Patrol officers make them aware of the rules, and they generally leave at that point.
So you mean actual camping, not like living in vehicle?
We haven't had any issues of living in vehicles that I recall recently. It's more of just maybe camping for the night, or they're passing through or something along those lines. And we can spot our Harbor Patrol officers are keen to spot those and kind of help them along, give them other options of where they can go to stay for the evening.
And then just one last question. At this point, do any of these changes affect, is this a safe harbor parking lot, or safe? I'm mixing the words.
Madam Chair, no, this is not part of our the New Beginnings Safe parking program. And the staff went through some pains to have the size limits be larger than what the ordinance allows on the street. So it's a more liberal ordinance in that sense.
Very good. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, we do have one lot, our Garden Street lot across from Cabrillo Boulevard, that we do participate in the New Beginnings program. So that would, I think we have one vehicle that is there on a nightly basis.
And none of these changes would negatively impact
Correct.
that? Okay. Thank you very much. I think if we don't have further questions, we'll invite public comment at this time. Our first speaker is Jamie or Jaime Diamond? Jamie. Welcome. And that will be followed by Mick Krauman. Oh, are you pooling time, or are you individual speakers? Okay.
Hi, my name is Jamie Diamond. I apologize, but there aren't high school babysitters on a Tuesday afternoon. So, Stardust. Oh,
I'm sorry. Could you please start again? I did not have the microphone on.
my name is Jamie Diamond. I am a business owner, Stardust Sport Fishing, located at the Sea Landing within the Santa Barbara Harbor. This is Max, my sidekick today. I am here to speak in support of staff's recommendations. As a business owner, we carry passengers fishing. Please be quiet. We take passengers fishing on our 2 boats, but at the Sea Landing there's also the Condor Express as well as the dive boats. And we, along with the Sailing Center, there's several businesses using that one end of the main lot. It's the boat launch side. A lot of those vehicles right there there's very limited single-use parking in that end, which is what our businesses mostly use. And to have those essentially blocked off 24/7, 365 is what it comes down to, is our passengers are having to lug gear, dive gear, fishing gear from much further away, and they feel, and I feel as well, it's fairly unreasonable to force people to have to come from so far away and walk down with gear. There's not a lot of single-use space. There's a lot of the trailer parking there. All the trailer parking is there. So we share that lot with the trailer parking as well as the single-use space, as well as other visitors. People bring their kayaks down or going for walks. Please, buddy. So some of the things I wanted to let you know is the annual slip holder, the blue sticker. I was at all the meetings that we roundtabled at, and the feedback that I heard from the slip holders is they were fine with that. They felt it was very reasonable to have to move their car once every 30 days, and especially if they were going on some long expedition, say to Hawaii or something, they would just have to talk to the Harborfront office and let them know, and then their car would be fine. I think it's well within reason, as well as trying to make waterfront access more accessible for the public in general. Businesses and individuals do abuse the local parking because it's $125 for an annual permit, and it's very affordable, and they can just leave their car there for days at a time, whether they're neighbors and they don't want to use the street parking, or they're limited because there's multiple people living in a house nearby or an apartment, or employees at local businesses. And so anything we can do to improve access to coastal facilities, maritime use, parking, which is, I mean, it's limited to a certain area. It's right there, and that's kind of it. So anything we can do to increase that, I greatly appreciate, and I appreciate the time that Waterfront staff has taken on this project. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Mick Cowman, and then followed by Mark Cooper.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Councilmember Gutierrez. I speak to you today as a private citizen as of Friday, concluded my employment with 19 years plus with the Waterfront Department. And in that capacity over the past year, I had the pleasure of working with Mr. Bossi, Lieutenant Engelbretson, Cesar Barrios, and City Attorney Colon. So I felt duty-bound to follow through to the near end, anyway, of this process. I just wanted to speak to basically three issues. Number one, by the way, I encourage your endorsement of this very strongly because I was in it from the beginning and I understand it quite well. Number one, this has been advanced in the absolute correct spirit of public policy. I say that because it reflects what's in the local coastal plan and, of course, the harbor master plan. This problem has been a long time brewing, and I salute my colleagues for having the courage to put their arms around it and wrestle with all the details. Second, this is also the result of a long and very open and transparent public process, beginning with the public workshop, then the Harbor Commission parking subcommittee, and then the Harbor Commission itself, and now, of course, at the Ordinance Committee. It's been supported all the way along that route because, as Mr. Bossi articulated, it is not only the function of sound public policy, what you see as an end result is a function of compromise, right? Staff could have very well said, you know, these blue permits, this was an old idea of the 1980s, and nobody needs to stay more than 72 hours. But they split the baby to a degree. They recognize that people with boats in the harbor may need to go away for a week or two, go cruising to Catalina in the summertime and what have you. But it offers a hammer, if you will. If there's weeds growing under it like you saw, that's just a misuse of a public resource. That's an abuse of people's ability to get to the harbor, the waterfront, the shops, the beaches, and what have you. And finally, I wanted to note that these, and also, by the way, in the terms of compromise, as Mr. Colon mentioned, the 22 feet is liberalizing the ordinance. The changing the exit hours on Los Baños was a liberalizing of the current rules and regulations. And finally, I think this slide speaks the proverbial 1,000 words. These are garages. And these aren't the only garages at the harbor. And it's been my perspective, both personally and professionally, and my colleagues heard me say it too many dozen times, that a family who lives in Des Moines and saves for a year to come to our lovely city and wants to access the beaches and the waterfront have as much right to those public parking spaces as anybody else, especially vehicles that are being used to store goods. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Mark Cooper, followed by Robert Claycomb.
Okay. Madam Chair and our council member, Oscar Gutierrez, thank you for letting us speak. This is, in fact, a very sad day for me. And it's sad because during all the years of residence in the harbor, I have never publicly aired any displeasure with our harbor staff. I prided myself on working with us behind the scenes to be a voice for constructive change. 3 times I've been asked to throw my hat in the ring to be a harbor commissioner, and I had to step aside and not do that because my wife and I participated internationally with surgical eye expeditions, and for that and other reasons we couldn't do it. I'm sad because that model of public praise and private constructive criticism has to change today. I'm sad that I and others need to take your time to demonstrate why today you absolutely need to send this proposed ordinance back to the harbor community. We are here to show you conclusively why this proposed ordinance is not ready for prime time. My focus is not on the inequities and obvious flaws of what has been proposed. I'll leave it to others to hopefully show you how favorite son harbor-related businesses can use our parking lot as a storage space for hugely oversized vehicles, while the rest of us won't even be able to park an ordinary short-body Sprinter van. Others will hopefully show you how businesses clearly get favored son status, while the rest of us live by a much harsher set of rules that staff created in the dead of night. These are serious structural problems, but those are not the main issues I want to leave you with. Rather than delving into the many product flaws, I want to instead focus on the process flaws. I will instead be outlining a process that showed little interest from the beginning in involving and informing the harbor community. I'll demonstrate this by shining the light of day on 3 very serious process flaws. First, the only public input meeting was held on June 13th. In fact, that meeting was hastily scrambled together. To the credit of the harbor staff, it was very well run, but in fact, it was a sham. Okay, that was the only problem that I could see with it, was actually the sham. And I'll show you that because it was less than 1 business day between their publishing of the results of that session and the meeting of the Harbor Parking Commission Subcommittee. This amounted to inadequate time for the community to digest what had been presented with, and allow us to plan and attend the subcommittee meeting. Less than 1 business day. Okay. In retrospect, staff has obviously already had their minds made up. They clearly had the ordinance drafted and were preparing to ease these rules past an all too docile Harbor Commission and into your hands as quickly and quietly as possible. Second,
30 seconds just to...
On August 9th, my former wife and I went to Ecuador to restore eyesight. We formally requested to Mr. Bossi that he read a letter aloud to the Harbor Commission and also to submit a request for continuance. He assured me by email on August 9th that he would do so. In fact, there is no evidence that the Harbor Commission minutes show that Mr. Bossi did either. There is only faint mention in the minutes of our correspondence and 0 mention that the Commission ever received or much less acted on the promised request. Third, Harbor has failed to every turn to use 2 major opportunities to inform the Harbor. They have dock lines and they have monthly mailings. They failed to use either of those. Instead, they buried this in Harbor Commission minutes that nobody reads. Okay, so these 3 major failures. Okay, it was a sham meeting, a failure to act on formal continuance requests, and the abject failure to use their own very public vehicle, information vehicles is a sham. So we ask you today to do what Mr. Bossy and the staff clearly failed to do. We ask you to send this poorly crafted ordinance draft back to the harbor community for some reasonable citizen input. Again, I'm sad beyond words that I need to come to you in this way and to publicly redress what is clearly a high-handed public service bums rush approach. Thank you for paying attention, and thank you for your help in getting us a much more equitable and thoughtfully crafted ordinance. And thank you for turning this around immediately and sending it back to the harbor.
May I ask you a question, Mr. Cooper? If you were to give public input, what would it be?
Well, my input is that the process needs to be much more open and publicly displayed to everybody in the community.
I'm sorry, aside from the process, I think we've received that message,
Oh,
but if there were a public input meeting, what would be your input?
Well, we'd have specific input about addressing this problem, which is a serious problem, and we acknowledge that, and addressing the fact that it's a parking lot, not a city street. So how can we address that? And there are some ways and mechanisms to do that. I think it's not beyond the scope of our time for me to do that here, but I would certainly want the rules to be cause-based. So if you have a parking width rule, it's based on the width of the stall. If you have a parking length rule, it's based on how safely can you negotiate the aisles. And if you have a height rule, it's based on the nearest obstruction. The nearest obstruction is about 15, 20 feet high. So as far as I'm concerned, a parking lot, those don't apply. So we need to have rules that are cause-based, and you can make laws based on a causal approach, not just on what my opinion ought to be. That would be what I would change.
Thank you. Robert Claycomb, followed by our final speaker, Elizabeth Rothman.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Gutierrez. I support the city's ordinance. I've been a slip holder since the mid-'90s. I was a liveaboard way back then. Currently, I'd say, 2 months ago, I walked through the lot, and I didn't get 124, but I got 75 vehicles that never move. I won't say I was part of, but I sat in a room here in 2013. Those vehicles haven't moved. Those are the same vehicles. They just don't. And I really dislike the fact that you can take a permit and abuse it so badly to get 365 days, 7 days a week parking for $120 a year. As Mr. Carrion knows, I have a Sprinter van. We pay parking at a private storage lot for $150 a month. Parked near me in the harbor, because I'm down there most every day, is a fellow that has 3 taxi cabs, a Sprinter and 2 cabs. The guy on the other side of me, where I kind of generally park, I park where there's no palm trees because I don't want the palm trees to fall on my car. He has 3 vehicles. He's a single liveaboard. One of them is his work truck. It never moves. And then his other car he uses as a small storage van, a vehicle to put his junk in. So I do think that policy of 365 days is really wrong. And I really agree that it should be less. And I've been in the harbor long enough and taken enough boat trips that if you're gone more than 30 days, somebody else you're going to need to park someplace else or get permission from the city. I mean, that's a really long boat trip, 30 days. So, if you want to store your own RV there, take it home. Because, if you walk through the lot, there's not just these things. There's a dozen or more RVs that just sit there. And they go off to do their business elsewhere. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker will be Elizabeth Rothman.
Hi. So there is clearly a problem in the harbor. What I would really like to address today is, because changes are going to come, and that's life and acceptable. But for liveaboards in the harbor who moved into the harbor knowing that these rules were set and have invested funds and have put their lives forward with these rules as they are, this is going to be a huge problem. It's going to affect the lives. I personally have a car that I need to use. I do decorative painting at the Biltmore and at other high-end places in town, that I can't accomplish that without a place to keep some things. Again, I'm not saying in maybe the 30 days so that everything stays moving, and maybe not every vehicle in every place. But again, these are maybes, and I don't think that we've come up with a great solution. This height restriction is going to seriously affect liveaboards who purchased these things and are probably going to be asked to remove them within a very short period of time, where we can't recoup any of our financial what we've put into our vehicles. It's going to leave us very optionless. If these get pushed forward, I really want there to be exceptions for liveaboards or grandfather us in as other boats in the harbor, such as the houseboats, which are no longer allowed to come in, but ones that were there have been allowed to stay there. And I feel like this is fair. Those vehicles will not be there forever, but there has to be some exceptions made for liveaboards. This is unfair, and it's going to be a crippling decision that you guys are going to put on some of our lives in the harbor. And these vehicles that, I don't even know if these are regularly permitted. I know that the harbor also allows permits and gives permits for oversized vehicles. We have no idea which is which and who has what. Maybe there could be a designated part of the parking lot for these exceptions, perhaps. I feel like there has to be more discussion. And like Mark said, we weren't privy. There hasn't been enough discussion. At the meeting that we did go to where these facts were found, which was a very well-run meeting, and everyone was very nice and friendly, and I was impressed by how they ran the meeting. However, they were very adamant on saying, we just want these 3 questions, and we didn't get to really address anything else. Questions were raised, but answers were not given, and we were told that would come later, and now here we are, because one day after we got the results of that, they decided to kind of push something through. And so I have a million other, things to say, but I think that allowing for some exceptions for liveaboards, even if the vehicles need to be moved. But this height restriction, I don't understand. I feel like it is not in the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish, although I do agree that the parking lot is an issue. Okay.
Can I ask you just a question about the height?
Yeah.
What type of vehicle is over 90 inches high?
So actually, the Volkswagen vans are about, I think, around 80. Now, that's what will fit under it only, and they're about $20,000 a piece. So if we need to get something else to replace the vehicles that we have, we're talking about a huge amount of money. In a time where, people who live aboard in the harbor probably don't have that kind of money to invest right now. Also, they're going to have to take off the roof racks. You can't even have a roof rack, won't fit under that requirement with the Volkswagen van, even if you let the air out of the tires. So I just think that this rule and this height restriction is unreasonable, and like I said, will be crippling to some people, including myself. So I just want that to be noted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, with that, I do have a question about the height limits and how the 90 was settled on and street requirement. I'm reading that the height limit on city streets is 82 inches. So does that mean a Volkswagen van with roof racks can't be on city streets? Or if you could help me with this.
We haven't, Madam Chair, we haven't discussed or prepared any sort of implementing regulations. In the case of the on-street ordinance, roof racks were not counted. That's what our regulations say. I imagine the waterfront will consider that. Sprinters come in 3 sizes. The smallest ones will fit, the biggest ones won't. What's different, let me say it this way. The width requirement of 82 inches is wider by 2 inches than our on-street regulations. That's important because it allows in all of the American-built vans, which would be Ford Transit, the General Motors product, I don't remember the name anymore, and then the Ram product. Those are all a bit wider than what we allow on the street. They could come in, standard vans. But 90 inches, like I say, gets the smallest of the Sprinters.
And why not the largest of the Sprinters?
I defer to Mr. Bossi.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, this isn't necessarily a Sprinter case. We do have everything from these $200 to $300, I believe some of them just sold for in our lot, to $125,000 camper vans like Mr. Cooper had mentioned. So we realized that it wasn't exactly like on-street parking. So we chose to give more in the height. So that's why we added an additional 8 inches on there. A VW van will easily fit the 90 inches. unless you have some sort of massive tire system on it and it's jacked up. So a standard VW van, a Vanagon, Westfalia, those will all fit under this 90-inch rule. The vans that won't, like Mr. Kalan said, are the larger Sprinters and the storage vehicles, as you see here. So the predominantly all vehicle, a lot of vehicles will be able to fit under this.
Is a larger Sprinter smaller than one of those?
It depends. They're right around the same. Those are pretty darn tall, those ones. Okay. But larger Sprinters, and you see a lot of those that are jacked up as well. Those would exceed that 90 inch.
Are they allowed to drive on our streets but not park on our city streets? Is that what the current?
That's right, unless one of three exceptions are present, and the exceptions are you can have a guest come from out of town for as many as 10 days in any 90-day period. You can get a commercial permit if you run a business, and you can get a permit for disability if you have a large disability access van. I'm going to correct myself. The 2020 Sprinters range from 96 to 114 inches, so they would all be prohibited under this proposal.
Yeah, I think that's one area that I'm not really comfortable with. If someone wants to have a Sprinter and they're living aboard and then they drive to Goleta when they come to shore or go out of town, I'm not sure about precluding certain brands of vehicles, but maybe you could help me with that. I mean, if the intent was to limit that type of vehicle and not a personal use vehicle, I don't know. If you could help me with that.
Sure, Madam Chair. This isn't easy. We spent many hours struggling with this. You could get into a pretty versus ugly. Mm-hmm. Well, that van's pretty, and that costs $120,000, but this one is $300 and it's filled with rust marks and pock marks. We don't want that one. As part of our public policy process, we took the community. And if you have a vehicle that's sitting there for beyond 30 days, whatever the size, it's being stored. Mm-hmm. And it's not your daily driver. And again, I want to separate the fact that a live aboard permit is just that. It is a permit, a month-to-month permit that allows you to live on your boat in the slip. It does not include parking. So when you make this decision to, regardless of the situation that you're in, when you make the decision to live aboard, you have to take all of those things into consideration. Everything into consideration, including this doesn't have a garage. I've got to buy a parking permit. It's similar to if you decided, maybe we should downsize and move to a condo. The kids are gone. My wife and I are going to move to a condo. Well, wait a second. It's only got outdoor parking. I don't want just outdoor parking. I want a garage to store my stuff. So it's a decision, a conscious decision that people make to live down there, and it's part of that process. Just as if you lived in a busy apartment complex, and there may be two of you, you and your husband or wife, and you're allowed one parking spot. Well, you got to figure that out, unfortunately. And we have a very limited parking resource here that is a public parking lot, and it should be open and available to the public as such.
Thank you for that explanation. What was the size of the smallest Sprinter?
I believe it's 96 inches in the 2020 model year, Madam Chair.
Okay. Well, I think everything for me, everything else in this ordinance I'm completely in support of, but I'd like to see that be 96 inches to just make it 96 inches, and especially because that doesn't take away from the number of people being able to park in spots. It's just a height, unless there's something I'm missing about a height restriction that it can't fit there for some reason. I think I'd like to propose 96 inches. I don't know. I think we're to discussion now. Councilmember Gutierrez?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Could you reiterate how much outreach you did to the harbor community?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So our first meeting was a workshop that was held June 13th, 2019. And as part of that, the kickoff, we wanted to get as many people involved as possible. As you know, as you sit in here, gathering public participation on anything is kind of hard. People are busy. So what we did is we sent out a Blackboard Connect notice, which is generally used for emergency type situations, or, hey, Marina One, your electricity is going to be cut off for 3 days as we do X, Y, and Z. We changed that a little, and we kind of went out of our comfort realm and put out a Blackboard Connect to over 1,400 recipients on June 7th. As a result, we got at least, it was more like 60 members of the public. We also did standard public noticing. We also take the added effort of putting notices on all the marina gates, our front counter, downstairs at our display board. We post it on the website, and then we also do sandwich board displays, so basically a much larger version of a notice at the entrance to all of our parking lots. So that was the first meeting. The second meeting, July 22nd, was the parking subcommittee meeting. That staff report was published on July 11th, and it included details about the June 13th meeting and the fact that we were going to be having a June 22nd, we're going to be having the June 22nd meeting. I also discussed that at the July 18th meeting of our Harbor Commission, again, public announcement. That was also posted on our website as well, and the various marinas. The meeting of August 15th, I should say that last meeting, an email was sent to attendees of the workshop on the 19th, which was Thursday, and the meeting was Monday. Our August 15th meeting of the Harbor Commission, standard public noticing, as well as the staff report, came out August 8th and was published. Agendas are always placed on our marina gates a week in advance, as well as display windows and our front counter, our display board down below. Did I say the marinas? I did. And then again for this, last Wednesday, we put out public notices also on sandwich boards at all the lots, at all the different marinas. We put it on our website and our counter and our various display boards. So we go far above and beyond just your standard 72-hour practice. The whole idea here was to engage the public as much as we could, and we felt that we've done that. We've had these meetings, and that's why we're here today.
Thank you. Mr. Cullen, can you just verify if we vote unanimously, this will go to the council for discussion, or?
Staff are seeking your recommendation to the council. So ordinarily, any changes that you make, we will make in the ordinance and forward on to the council with your recommendation.
And if it's a split vote?
Unless the committee wishes more information to come back to you on a split vote, it would still go forward to council.
So that would give the public more opportunity to voice their opinion about the issue.
Certainly, and with staff, we can get more specific about what kinds of vehicles are what size.
Thank you. We're in discussion, correct?
Yes.
I have a little apprehension about this ordinance because I hear from residents about how hard it is to be able to afford to live here and to visit here, and the beachfront parking I feel is a gem of the city, and I just feel apprehensive of adding any more ordinances to that. I understand the issue and the need, but it's hard for people to just make it as it is. So to put more regulation on how they can access the beach makes me feel a little uncomfortable. I understand there's a limit, there's a line, right? There's the argument of that if you do too much regulation, that you're keeping people from accessing the beach. But if you don't do enough, then we have a situation like this where you're actually keeping people from going to the beach because there's not enough space. So I get there's a line, and I'm somewhere in the middle. So I acknowledging that if we push this forward to council, that gives the public more time to come in and voice your concerns and your opinions. So I will go ahead and recommend staff recommendation.
Thank you, Councilmember Gutierrez. I have a question then, Mr. Kalan, about do we have a motion and a second then, if that is...
Madam Chair, you've correctly identified that you and Councilmember Gutierrez need to come to some conclusion about how you want to move this forward. One suggestion would be a vote that includes the proposed changes that you might support, and you might see if Mr. Gutierrez would support that.
Thank you. Mr. Gutierrez, would you support the height increase to 96 inches, or would you rather have it be recommending a height increase but not with a specified number?
I'll
or not at
move
all?
with your recommendation.
Okay. Then I suppose I'll make a motion to forward staff recommendation, the ordinance changes, thank you, with a recommendation to increase the height limit from 90 to at least 96.
I second that.
And if there's no further discussion, we'll have a roll call vote, though that doesn't seem quite necessary, but yes.
Councilmember Gutierrez.
Yes.
Madam Chair Snedden.
Yes. Thank you. And that concludes our meeting, and we are adjourned.